Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Here is to hoping. I am going to try to keep an eye on my microphone. And I still haven't re-recorded last week, but I will, I promise. So that you get all of the answers to what I had. Usually I start out with what are some of the challenges, and then what are some of the things that you can do to address those challenges. And the second half of my video last week was no sound because my microphone went. So we are going to hope that the microphone stays live through this whole thing. So what we're here to talk about today is a little bit, you'd think, I know that everybody thinks that it's Thanksgiving, so let's talk about gratitude, and maybe we'll wrap up with something around that. I still have so much more to say on the toxic work environment because, what I give an F about is really helping CEOs and senior leaders to create workplaces that foster psychological safety, that foster inclusion, that foster creativity, innovation, and healthy debate, that helps them wipe out cordial hypocrisy and helps them to wipe out all of the things that are diminishing the productivity and diminishing the output and diminishing the creativity and capability of their employees to, one, make a difference in the world. To make a difference in the world. That's part of why companies exist. Two is to elevate the people who work for you. When you elevate the people who work for you, then you actually will do what I help companies do, which is the third thing, which is make money. Yes, I know you want to make money. That shouldn't be at the expense of your people. And in so many organizations, it is. I was just talking to a friend where productivity and results were number one, but getting input and getting to the point where people really felt valued and appreciated and that their input mattered wasn't a part of that, which was rather interesting. And it's a challenge. So what I want to do is just really touch on what could be a potentially touchy subject. 64%, according to a survey, 64% of Americans work in a toxic work environment. And in this Fortune article, she gave this woman, and let me see if I can find her name real quick. She wrote the article, Catherine Minshew wrote an article for the Muse, and it's in Fortune magazine's online magazine. Excuse me. And she compared it to how she compared this situation. So I'm going to explain it in a second here. So how many of you think you're a great driver? That's one of the questions. The vast majority, over almost 80% of us, think we are great drivers. And less than 1% of us think that we're worse than average. And she relates that back to how that pattern holds true in the workplace. That leaders think that they're great leaders. Probably 80 to 90% of them think they are a good or great leader. And probably less than 1% think they're worse than average. And yet, 64% of Americans believe that they work or feel that they work in a toxic work environment. And what if that were true? What if it were true that, even 80% of managers thought they were great? Toxic work environments come from not just leaders, there are employees. But if you have employees who aren't leaders in an organization and they're creating the toxicity, then it's your job as a leader to address it. And the focus that I want to share with you. So you can look at this from an employee perspective, if you've got a team member who's doing these things, or if you have a team member who is a leader who is doing these things. Michelle, very true. 64 seems like it would be higher based on my experience. I know. I don't know. This was an early 2023 survey that Fortune did. And I really think you're right. There's probably, that was my thought as well, was that there is, uh, there it's higher than 64%, because most of the people I talk to have some experience of toxicity in the leadership. So, when we talk about toxicity, and Michelle, if you want to drop some comments in about what your experience is of what toxicity looks like, here are some things. I spoke at an event earlier this fall. I think it was late summer, early fall. And I had everybody write on Post-it notes what were some of the things that represented toxic leadership, or a leader who my husband and I refer to as does not play well with others, because that's how I was early in my career. And they came up with 86 different things. 86. So I'm going to share just a couple of those with you. Disrespectful, abusive, non-inclusive, unethical, cutthroat, micromanagement, distrustful. That's just a few of them. And what I want to go through is, and help people think about, is could you be contributing to the toxicity in the workplace, in your workplace? Could you be a contributing factor? And here are several signs that, and I did this in a previous post. Here's your sign. I think it's Bill, now I can't think of his last name, the comedian who, here's your sign. So if you have one of these types of behaviors, you might be contributing to toxicity in your organization. And I'll talk about each one a little bit, and then I'll talk about how you can, shift that behavior. And this is one that I exhibited, and I have had to work on a lot in my career, is, do you always speak first? And particularly if you're a leader, or if you're a leader and you have someone on your team who always contributes first. When you speak up first, you could be creating an environment that sets the tone that that's the truth, or that's the way, that's the right thing, and you're not creating the safety and the openness for others to contribute their ideas. So a toxic leader will sometimes end up, this woman who wrote this article talks about being in their own brain bubble. And they don't always take in other people's perspectives. They don't always really look at and appreciate the input from everyone else. And so as a leader, see if you can be the last one to contribute, or at least give several people on the team and really encourage. And it is going to be painful if you don't do this regularly. If you are used to providing your perspective first, you can open it up to the group. And if you do this and no one talks, then you call on someone. Okay, Joe, tell me what you think. Michelle, tell me what you think. And there are so many different ways to get input from everyone else before you share your perspective. And really ask questions. Come into a conversation with a series of questions that you want to ask the group, and come into the group with a way to get input. I actually have a freebie. I'll put the link to this, of ways to weed out cordial hypocrisy. When people hear you talk first, a lot of times they will agree either out of fear or loyalty, and that's cordial hypocrisy. You want them to be able to share their perspective, even if it's an idea that's crazy or that might not work. It might spark an idea in someone else. And being patient to allow that time for people to think. If you have people who are introverted thinkers, if they really need time to think internally before they speak and share, you need to make sure that you give some time, and that can be very painful. So Michelle says that micromanagement is the big one I'm dealing with. Oh, she said she is dealing with it. Had a former boss have me write an article and got to the end of proofing, and she used her red pen and made me rewrite the entire thing. Oh my word. Also have the experience with not having what I say being valued. Yes, those are two very big ways. Micromanagement actually came up like 10 times in this group. We had a group of probably 30 to 40 people, maybe 40 people. And micromanagement came up a lot. And I know several people who've left their jobs or found another job in the company because of micromanagement, and we'll talk about that actually in a second, because that's one that we're gonna hit on. What another friend of mine talked about, when you think about always speaking first, be fertile ground for other people's ideas. See how you can see how there's multiple ways that things can be done. See how you can look at and see that something, and also part of it is when you allow them to speak first, when you start to see how their ideas and could be valuable and could be solutions. That took me a while, I will tell you. And I don't know how I came upon this, but thinking that my ideas were always right. That I could come up with an idea and just really getting to the point. And this was early in my career, and it took me a while to really work through this and getting to that point of being able to really notice that another solution might get us there. Maybe it might not be as fast. Maybe it might not be the same as mine, and it still is a solution. And sometimes other solutions might get us there faster. Other solutions might help the team learn. Spending a lot of time on this one. So the next one is really partially about micromanaging. And actually the next two, which are you find yourself constantly, this could be a sign that you are contributing to toxicity in the workplace, is that if you find yourself constantly checking in with your employees. The next one is that your direct reports, was favoritism on your list. I'll have to look. I don't know that somebody brought up favoritism specifically. It is that when you aren't the favorite, it makes it hard to work in such an environment. You're absolutely right, Michelle. I appreciate that input. Yes, favoritism, I think, is another one. And I'm going to have to add that. I'll make sure I add that to my list. And maybe I'll even create a freebie, and put that list out there at some point so that people can see this is how employees view toxicity in the workplace. There's, literally 80 different things that they feel are creating toxic work environments. But if you find yourself constantly checking in, you're not giving your employees a chance to actually grow and develop and accomplish their goals. They need to be able to plan and execute and review, give them that cycle, and then let them come to you and set the expectation. Start to verbally set the expectation that once their assignments or once their projects are given to them, you'll expect maybe a weekly check-in. And maybe you have, and if you don't, I encourage you to have a weekly check-in with your employees. And don't check in regularly after that. And that you really expect them that if they have a challenge or an issue, that they will come to you, and that you expect them to plan and execute and actually review their work and bring all of those results to you. And if they have an issue, that they're bringing potential solutions as well, which is a whole different type of challenge. The other thing is, are you giving your direct reports very specific tasks? If you are giving them very small specific tasks. Now, if you are a leader in a very entry level and you have a very entry level team, they might need those very specific tasks. Okay. That's something that as a leader, you have to figure out. I learned that in a project management role that I was in early in my career. Most of the team, we would walk through everything that needed to be done, and the team would go off and do their things. And one girl would just flounder. That one woman on the team would just flounder. And so we had to walk through and really create a very detailed step-by-step what she needed to do to accomplish the bigger goal. She didn't have the skills yet to be able to break it down she was fairly new to the organization and fairly new in her career. And that was an interesting challenge for me as a leader to really be able to, and again, I wasn't that far into my career either. And it was an interesting learning experience to really be able to observe and assess and be able to really help employees in different ways based on what they need. So when you're giving them those, very detailed, very specific tasks, you're not allowing their genius, their mind, their ability to grow. And if your job as a leader, and not if, but your job as a leader is to level them up. And how can they do that if you're giving them every single specific task along the way to do? They need to learn and grow and figure all of that out. So I'm not going to do all of these. Maybe I'll put some of these into, I'll actually link the article because it's a pretty good article. I'll link it in a post maybe later this week or next week. Another sign if you're contributing toxicity to the workplace is if you behave differently around your team than you do around your boss. If you are more aggressive, if you're more direct, if you're more commanding and whatever behaviors that you think you need to be in front of your team, demanding and maybe a little overbearing or really in control. And then when you're with your boss, you're more laid back or not as aggressive, not as demanding, more passive, and maybe not even passive, but check yourself. And everyone's on the same team and you're all working towards the same goals. And think about, is the way that you're behaving, both your verbal and nonverbal, the tone of your voice, the speed of your voice, the tone, the volume. So those nonverbals, how your presence, your executive presence is showing up in the room. Think about if your boss was in the room, would you behave the same way? And that's a check that you can do for yourself, is to think. And really, if you want to motivate your team, being demanding and aggressive isn't really an effective. Fear-based leadership is really not effective. It turns people off. It shuts them down. It creates that quiet quitting, to be perfectly honest. When you look at it, it creates that I'm just going to do enough to get by kind of attitude with your employees, because they're not, as Michelle shared, it's hard to work an environment if you're not the favorite, or if you're being micromanaged, if what you're saying isn't being valued, people shut down at that point. People start to only do what's absolutely necessary. And so those are just a few things. So they were, Michelle said 100%. If you are speaking first, so that's the first one. If you find yourself constantly checking in, if you give very specific, very detailed tasks to your direct reports, or if you act differently, those 4 things, and if you act differently around your boss, these are the things that Catherine shared, and then I added some color commentary and some thoughts around it from my experience. And these are the things that you want to try to bring some awareness to as well as bring some shift to. And if you need a coach, I'm here to help. Or if you have someone on your team or a leader in your organization who needs to make some of these shifts, I'm telling you, coaching makes a world of difference. I've had a coach most of my career since I was given the does not play well with others on my report card early in my career. And I was sent to some leadership training. And I will tell you that sending someone to training isn't the only answer. It can help. It can bring awareness. And I had found that the coaching in between these different learning events that I attended made all the difference in the world. Because for those of us who may come across as aggressive and overbearing and or condescending, some of this comes from habits were built so long ago. And if you had these habits of being the toxic leader in your work environment for years and years and years, it's going to take time and it's going to take constant awareness. And sometimes it's having that outside perspective on a regular basis that helps to bring that awareness and start to separate what is triggering that behavior and where you have more choice to actually shift your behavior into a new way of being. Because like I said, one of the things I really give an F about is really helping CEOs and senior leaders to create organizations that have psychological safety, that have inclusion, that foster creativity and innovation, and that really foster healthy debate, that people feel that they can say what's on their mind, bring up issues, bring up risks, have the debate. That's not conflict. Debate is not conflict. And we'll do that in another session, but really foster healthy debate. That's why I'm here. As a coach, as a leadership development, team development consultant, I want to help CEOs and senior leaders create that environment that fosters elevating employees so that you make more money. In the end, it is, yes, you want to make more money, and this will help by elevating your employees, by including them, by creating that safety to have the healthy debate. Lisa Berry shared, people will naturally be perceived as behaving differently because of your level in a hierarchical organization. That's interesting, Lisa. I'd love to talk more on that at some point. Yes, there's always the hierarchy in an organization gives a different perspective. And it is interesting, though, because I don't look at the hierarchy. Everybody views hierarchy differently. I grew up in a certain situation where we had some leaders in our church environment who were also family friends. And so I got a very different perspective. And I know that's a religious setting and the work setting might be different. That really set the tone for me to not view leaders differently. And I probably still do. You have a very good point, Lisa. I think that you're absolutely right. And some people really expect leaders to behave in a certain way. And leaders sometimes think that they're being effective when really they're being toxic. So these were the things I wanted to share with you today. We talked a little bit earlier about what it looks like. And then if you are the person who thinks you're a great driver and thinks you're a great leader, just check these things. Do you speak first more often than not? Are you checking in too often with your employees? Are you giving people very specific tasks when you could be challenging them to take a project and plan it and execute it and review it with, on their own with minimal input from you? And then do you act differently around your team than your boss? Those are the things I'd like you to just spend some time reviewing and thinking about. And that is what I have for you today. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Lisa, for joining. And for anyone else who's online, would love to get any other comments when people view this. If you view it on the replay, just put replay in the comments, or if you've got some ideas or thoughts, or If you have ideas or thoughts of things you'd like me to share on future lives, please share that as well. Have a great rest of your day and have an awesome holiday for those of you in the US. I know I have some followers who are outside the US, but we have Thanksgiving this weekend. And so have a very blessed, very healthy, very fun, and connecting with your family and friends on in this holiday season. And also keep in your prayers those who are struggling and those who don't have what they need to survive or who have experienced serious loss in the last, whatever months or year. Just keep those people in your thoughts and prayers. Have a great rest of your day and happy Thanksgiving to those here in the US.